But this isn't Putin. Putin still has an inner circle. We still bug his phone and read his faxes. Xi has no one. And you can't bug someone's brain. Aside from supplying weapons components and maybe even some weapons, there's really nothing that the Chinese can do to help. The front where it matters is just way too far away. And the Russians and the Chinese, it's always been a relationship of convenience. Not that it's insignificant.
Yeah.
But both of them have always felt that if they thought they could get a real deal with the United States, they would drop the other one in a heartbeat. I don't think that's changed. But even if the Russians are facing a complete collapse, I don't think the Chinese are going to get meaningfully involved.
Yeah.
They know in a world where they actively intervene is one where they go to public enemy number one in the United States. And they know what that means. They know they have to... The Russian system does not require an open globalized system to survive. It doesn't require economic growth to survive. China does. Its population is much more restive, and it's much more dependent upon the outside world simply to feed itself. Russia is a massive food exporter. So the Russians can eat a lot of privation and continue. The Chinese cannot. They just die. So the Chinese are always going to look for a way to have their cake and eat it too. And that's exactly what they've been doing. But if Russia were to collapse tomorrow, what we would probably see is the Chinese basically ask around to Japan and the United States, like, hey, do you mind if we go in and take some bits of this? The bull case. We are at a point where I don't think even if the United States wanted to rescue the Chinese that we could. I think the problem is too far advanced. I mean, we're nearing a situation in the United States strategically where, for primarily demographic reasons, the United States is going to have to make up a list of countries that we want to support moving forward. And it's very likely that Germany is going to be on that list. So you're looking at something on the scale of a Marshall Plan happening every year for the United States to sustain countries that it finds to be strategically important. We can choose to try to help China or try to help everyone else on our list. And the only way we would decide to try to help China would be if they basically did a strategic surrender. And even then, I think it's beyond America's capacity. He's in the upper 2/3. It's better than we've had in a while. Was one of the least consequential, worst presidents we've ever had, because for 8 years he didn't leave the Oval Office. He didn't have a conversation with anyone, even his own allies. The reason everyone in Europe loves Obama is because he never called or showed up. He never asked anything of you, and that was bliss.
He was coughing a lot.
It's like since the Cold War ended, I'd say probably Bill Clinton was our least bad president, and W is our second least bad, and we've just got progressively worse until Trump. Biden is probably in the same quality level of George W. Bush overall, I'd say, which, you know, is not great, but he's better than the last two. The reason I think he's a shoo-in is Donald Trump is a great campaigner within the American right. And he will absolutely be the nominee. There is no one who can challenge him because there are so many people who are his staunch supporters who will vote for him in the primaries no matter who else is in and no matter what Donald Trump does. So he's a lock to be the candidate. So is Biden. Biden is an incumbent president. They're not going to let Bernie Sanders run as a Democrat again, and the Democratic Party has already closed ranks to prevent a primary fight from even happening. And although honestly it is refreshing to see somebody who basically is from the American far right running as if he was from the American far left, but you know, we're talking political horseshoes now. Okay, so it's going to be these two guys. What we saw in the midterm elections last November was that independents showed up in numbers, which is something they don't normally do. Normally independents only show up for the big elections, not the off years, but they showed up in numbers. And in exit polling, they indicated by very strong margins that they strongly disapproved of the economic management of the Biden administration. They thought it was hurting them personally. And yet they voted for Democrats by huge margins. If you're an independent in the United States, the only way that you can influence the political process is to show up for the general election. Donald Trump is trying to make the general election not matter. So independents have already decided that even if it's not in their own economic interests, It is in their political survival interests that they have to vote against Donald Trump and anyone that he supports. You do that on a national scale in a general election? Well, we're going through a political transition, and it takes a decade, and we're just not through it yet. We'll get through it. The factions are moving around. We will have a different Democratic and Republican parties a few years from now that will be a little bit more sane. But we're in the churn right now, and that's always ugly. No, the deals that are beyond the dollar are extraordinarily limited. So let's see, what's the best way to attack this? If you're going to be a global currency, like a real global currency, you need to have a massive volume that circulates, because you have to be able to lubricate global trade without your currency value changing a lot. So you both need a lot of the currency, you need to be a large economy, and you can't be a major economic player in trading. Because if you were, you would care what the value of the currency is, and you would change it day to day to serve your own interests. Right now, that's only the United States. The Europeans kind of removed themselves from the equation with the bailout packages back in the first decade of this century, when they started confiscating insured bank deposits to pay for the bailouts. That was a bad call if you wanted to be a global currency. Understand politically why it was done, but it had an economic cost. The Japanese aren't interested at all. They tried back in the 80s and it hurt them badly. They will never do it again. The Brits, until they figure out what Brexit means, they're completely out of the equation. And that's everyone. Yes, the Chinese have a lot of currency, but it's all locked up within their own system, because their first and foremost concern when it comes to finance is control of the domestic market. And every time they crack open their financial world a little bit, like €1 trillion equivalent floods out in just a few months. So we're actually nowhere near the high level in Chinese history for the percentage of their goods that are resolved in non-dollar terms. So there's a lot of talk. Action has been less. And if you look at some of the specifics that have been announced, you've got the Argentines saying that they're all in. Never look to Argentina for financial trends unless it's about truancy. We've got Bangladesh saying that they will pay for a nuclear reactor in rubles. The Bangladeshis can't pay for it because they don't have the money. This is the most corrupt country in Asia. They were never going to get the reactors in the first place. So saying that it's going to be paid for in rubles, whatever. The Russians and the Indians had a near public argument about how their respective currencies were worthless, and neither of them wanted the other ones. So now all you've got left is Brazil saying, yeah, we'd love to have a multinational currency to support international trade, but this is a country that exports goods that are almost 95% purely dollar denominated, so they're just kind of raging against the reality. They have no ability to move it beyond. And then finally, if we did get another currency, who manages it? The Russians would like it to be the ruble so that they can manage it. Same with Argentina. But that wouldn't work for anybody except for Russia and Argentina. It can't be either. Gold, there is not enough volume of gold to support international trade unless we were to find about 100 times more than we currently have on a global basis. And Bitcoin has all the same problems as gold with none of the benefits, because at least gold at the end of the day does have an industrial use. Bitcoin does not. There are some places that look really good. One of the things to remember about globalization is it created this artificial security environment that encouraged a lot of countries that had not been able to be significant industrial powers before to suddenly join the game. Germany and Korea are probably the poster children for the success of globalization.